being a little slow. So again, hit create new, choose standard. That's perfectly fine for what we're doing. Okay, and we're going to start just by making a solid color background. So I don't want you to leave it white. Let's give it a color. I know a few of you are ahead of me over there. But to do that, let's start by grabbing the rectangle tool. So come over to your toolbar on the left, find the rectangle. And just like we've done a few different times, before you actually draw the rectangle, you can come over here on the right and you can pick out a color you would like. As long as it's not white, I don't care what color it is. And the only reason I don't want it to be white is so that I can tell you actually added a background color. So if you come over here to the right and you click on fill, you can choose any color that you like. One of these little squares that's already here, or you can click this little globe right up there by the word fill, and it'll let you pick like even more colors, whatever makes you happy. Doesn't matter to me. Okay. And do me one more favor. We don't want a stroke on it. A stroke is an outline. It can kind of cause some issues later. So where it says stroke, click on that one and choose right here where my mouse is spinning, that white box with the red diagonal line through it. And that'll just turn off the stroke. Okay. Now, if you already drew your rectangle before I reminded you could change the color, you could just click on your rectangle and then it'll let you change the color after you've drawn it. Okay. Either one is fine. But I'm going to go ahead and draw this rectangle. And if you need to resize it or anything, remember, your friendliest tool for shaping and resizing stuff is the second tool down on the toolbar. It's the free transform tool. It's the one that looks like a mouse, like a cursor with a rectangle. Okay, so I can easily click on it, resize it if I want to. And if you need to zoom in or zoom out, there is a little drop down up here where you can zoom in and zoom out. Or you can hit Control plus to zoom in and Control minus to zoom out. And I promise I'm going over really basic stuff. I'll stop here in just a second. But just as a reminder too, if it hangs over the edges, you have a black like rectangle on your screen. That's the stage area. If it hangs outside of those edges, that's fine. It'll trim itself down when we save it. Just make sure that you keep what you want to be visible inside of that black box. Okay. Cool. We're feeling good. I'm looking around. We got lots of colors. Lots of, yeah. All right, cool. So, Luis, you okay over there? You okay? You all right? Okay. Okay. I'll go. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's name this layer. Okay, double click on layer number 1 and just name it BG for background. Okay. There you go. And so now when you click on this, yeah.
I was trying to click on two of this.
It was just set to a different color. That wasn't anything needed. It was just something left over from the last time. Somebody's using it. It's not letting you click on it just because you're not selected on something. Like if you click this, it'll let you choose. Yeah, and it'll let you change that. It has to know like what you want to mess with. That makes sense. It's smart to like. You're smart. Please. Okay. Yeah, really quick. One thing I am noticing on a couple of people, if your animate looks a little bit different than mine, whenever we mess around with different types of assets and we were dragging and dropping different symbols into our practice stuff that we did a few days back, it may have changed like the setup of your workspace. Okay, so do me a favor really quick, check, because I want to make sure you have all the things you need. Come up to the top right-hand side of the screen. And there are 3 like bigger icons. There's one with an arrow, there's a rectangle, and there's a circle play button. Click this rectangle and just make sure that you are on essentials. Okay, so if you're not, just click the word essentials and it'll just make sure that everything kind of flips back. You have all the panels you're supposed to have. It may say something like pig run or something like that from where we messed with stuff recently. And I just want to make sure you have what you need. Okay, so one more time, rename your layer BG if you haven't already. And let's go ahead and hit save just in case something crashes. So let's go up to file and let's hit save as. Okay, and I'm gonna save this as ShapeTween. Okay, so shape is in SHAP, tween is in TWEEN, and I'm gonna make several of these. So I'm gonna put the block for mine. Okay. All right, cool. So this is the only thing we're going to put on our background layer. Okay, before we stretch out our timeline or add a bunch of frames, let's go ahead and put several different things on our stage. So for now, let's lock the BG layer just so that we don't accidentally mess it up or put something in the wrong place. So come down here to the bottom left-hand side of your layers panel and just click right below the lock symbol to lock your BG layer. Okay, so again, come down here by the timeline where it says BG, click the lock to lock that layer. All right. Now, we're going to go ahead and we are going to add another layer. So over here in the same little area, hit the little square with the plus sign. Let's make a new one. Now, this is where you need to know what word you want to use. You can use either your first name, your last name, or a word of your choice, as long as it's school appropriate and it's at least 3 letters. Here's what I would not do. Don't go over like 6. And I know it's hard for some people. Some people have a long first and last name. Try to keep it between 3 letters and 6 letters. Less than 3, you're not going to have much action. Not much is going to be going on. More than 6, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot for you to have to build. So think of what you want your word or your name to be really quick. And this is the really, really important thing. Okay, so listen to me closely on this. Every single letter needs its own layer. Okay, if we try to put them all on the same layer, they're going to freak out. You might remember when we did the gazelles, I had you go back at the very end and we had to delete all the extra gazelles out of there so that they didn't freak out. Same kind of scenario here. If all your letters are on the same layer, it's not going to know what to turn into something else and it's going to panic. So we have to do one letter at a time. So whatever the first letter is in the name or the word that you chose, go ahead, come down to your layers panel for your own sake. Type in that first letter. I'm going to do my last name. So it starts with a J. I'm going to do J. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to grab the text box. Okay. So grab the text tool over here. And remember, when you draw the text box, it doesn't let you draw a very big one. Okay. But we can change the size, the font, all that good stuff. So just draw a box somewhere. We can move it later. And type in one letter, the first letter of your word, whatever it is. Okay, and then I want you to take a second. Highlight your letter. So mine is J. Okay, come over here. I want you to choose how do you want it to look aesthetically. Okay, you could pick any font you like as long as it's in English. I don't care. I like to pick kind of fat fonts because then it just kind of looks like it transforms into a shape a little bit better if it's a little bit kind of like chunky font to begin with, so to speak. But you can pick whatever font you like. It'll work with any font. Okay, like I think I'm going to use one called Bauhaus. It's Bauhaus, but you could choose what you like. Okay, it's just a little chunky. It's not super skinny. And I'm going to go ahead and pick a different color. So don't use the same color as your background, but whatever other color you want to use is up to you. Okay, you can make it whatever you want as long as we can see it on the screen. That's good. And remember, you won't see the color until you let go of the letter. Okay, it's kind of troublesome like that. Okay. And I'm going to make my font around 90 points. So when you are selected on your letter and you come over here where it says character, okay, you do have a size. Every font is a little bit different. Some fonts are just bigger to begin with and some are smaller. But I'm going to make mine around 90 points. And if you just like eyeball and look at my screen, my letter's not huge. I want to have enough room that my name can move around. So you know how many letters are in your word or your name. Make sure your letter is big or small enough that everything will probably fit in there later. We can always change it. We can always adjust it. But this is the basic thing that we're going to do first. Okay, so I've got one letter. Guess what we're going to do now? We're going to repeat this over and over again until you get all the letters in your name or your word. So I'm going to come back down here. If my J looks good, I can move it around later. I'll move it around in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, though, and I'm going to do the next letter in my name. Okay, so again, new layer. I'm going to rename that layer. Now, I have 2 I's in my last name. A lot of people have a lot of vowels in their name, like multiple E's, multiple A's, things like that. Okay, I have two I's. I'm going to number it. I'm going to do I1, and when I get to I number 2, I'll number it. That way, when we move things later, I know which I is moving, if that makes sense. So I'm going to grab the text box again, and it should remember the same settings you just picked, the same font, the same color. If you want to make them each different, you can. They don't have to all be the same, but I'm going to leave mine the same. Okay. So I'm just going to repeat that. So I'm going to do new layer for each letter. I'm going to rename the layer what that letter is so I can find it here in a little bit. I'm going to draw a new text box. I'm going to type the letter in. And I'm just going to, I'll rearrange them later and make them look nicer at the very end once they're all in there. Okay, so here's my second I. I'm going to number it number 2. Throw in this other little text box. Okay, and then I'm going to add one more layer because that rounds out all my letters. Okay, now do us both a favor. I haven't rearranged them yet, but once you do get all your letters, just hit save to be safe. That way you don't have to like retype it if it crashes or something. Now, once you do get all your letters in there, I want you to center them. Okay, you could put the shapes here in a minute anywhere you want on the screen, but let's try and center your name. It doesn't have to be like absolutely perfect, just kind of eyeball it. But I'm just going to try my best. When you move your letters, and I'm just using one of the 2 tools up here at the top of the toolbar. There's 2 different arrows up here. You can use either one to move your letters. But when you do move them, typically you see how I get these like little black lines that pop up? It's trying to align it with the other things on the screen. So you can use those to kind of help you line them up if you really want them to be precise. Okay. Another thing you could do, if you just get them lined up in the same row, and you can use your arrow keys just to move them a little bit, but like mine are kind of arranged the way I want, but they're not really in the center. I can take the arrow tool and draw a box, and it'll grab all the letters, and then I can move them all at once to the center. Okay, so just take a second, and you can space yours out more than I did. You can adjust yours however you would like. Okay, but let's take a second. I want to give everybody a chance. Some of you had a lot more letters to type. I want to give everybody a chance to get theirs set up the way they want. When you do get it set up the way you want, hit save again. Just kind of, make sure everything looks good. Now, this is where you need to make one final decision. Are you happy with what all your letters look like? Are you happy with the font? Are you happy with the color? Are you happy with like it in general? If you want to change anything, change it right now. Okay, so like you can still go in here. If you take your mouse, you just double click on a letter. It'll let you highlight it, and you can come back over here to the character section. You could change anything you like. Okay, but take a second to do that now, because here in a minute, we are going to convert them into something else, and they won't be a text box anymore. We won't be able to edit them in the same way. All right, most people's screens look pretty settled. Yeah. Maybe just been on the value of stretch. So oh, you've got them all locked. You're doing a good job locking them all. That's why. So let's see this. Yeah, I think English is stretch. You can use this. So just kind of, if you want to, if they're like different sizes, it won't hurt anything. But if you do want to resize them, I'm just doing the black squares. Yeah, a lot of people are using different fonts. So double click on it, and it should let you highlight it. So highlight it, and then come over here and you can click and drag. So like the top up for a second. I'm sorry. I thought it would hang up as well. If you just click and drag on top of the number, you see the cross or do the something else, like you just click and drag right there. And it'll make it bigger. You can just eyeball it so you get the best. Yeah, you can make your letters different colors if you would. All right. So one last time, save before we move on to the next step. Okay. All right. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. I know a few of you do this kind of on your own already. You've already kind of figured out how this works, but I haven't actually shown the whole class how to do it. I would like you to come down here to the timeline. Okay, I'm going to stretch my timeline up for a minute, and this is not what I'm talking about, but you can stretch your timeline up for a minute. So if you hover over the top edge of the timeline, it'll give you like a little white arrow, and you can stretch it up. I'm going to stretch it up just so I can see all my letters at once. And again, that was not the thing I was going to show you that you'd never known before. I know a lot of you mess with that quite often. Okay, so if you look down here at the bottom of the screen, obviously we have multiple layers now. Okay, and each one only has one frame. Okay, if you remember in the little animation that I have over here, the animation ends with the letters being normal so that we can read them. So they start out as shapes and then they turn into the letters. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take these frames that we've already made and we're going to drag them down our timeline so that they start a little bit later. And then we'll put shapes at the very beginning of our animation. So if you've locked your letter layers, unlock them for a minute. We'll lock them back here in just a second because we need to be able to move them. And if they're locked, you won't be able to do what you need to do. But I'm going to grab each one of my letters. And to do that, all you have to do is click on it. Okay. And I'm going to start. You can leave the BG layer alone. I'm going to start at the bottom, grab my first letter. And if you hold shift down, okay, I think this will work. We'll try it. You can grab the top layer and it'll highlight them. I know it'll highlight them. I think it'll let us do the next step too. So if you highlight them all at once, now this is where it's a little picky and it's a little frustrating as an Adobe app like this. But if you take your mouse, they're all highlighted, you click right on one of those blue frames and you hold it down, like keep holding it, and you drag it. You see how I get that blue column that's moving across the timeline? I'm going to drag it all the way down to 60. Okay. Now, if you drag it and you let go somewhere earlier, like 40, okay, you can keep dragging it, like just select it again if you need to, drag it. Let's move all your letters down to the 60 mark. And if you need to zoom out, because some other people that use your computers will like zoom in and move the timeline and it stays set by whoever last used it. Remember, you can use this little slider right here to zoom in or zoom out on the timeline to see more or see less, just whatever you prefer. You can also just scroll if you like scrolling. But let's drag them all the way to the 60 mark. Now you can do them individually, one at a time. And I know that that's like a little bit of a burden that takes a lot of work. But now if you slide through, remember our BG layer only has one frame. So it's only a color on that very first frame for right now. Okay, and it's hard to tell, but you should, like it's hard to tell if you have white letters like me. Most of you have colored letters though, so you can probably see your letters show up at the very end. But my letters don't show up until that last frame. I'll come over to you in just a second, Drew. So go ahead, hit save. And let's go ahead and continue our BG layer so that the background does actually show up the whole time. So on the BG layer on the timeline, just click the spot right underneath 60 for the BG layer. And let's hit F5 up at the top of your keyboard. Okay, and then hit save. Okay, so just hit F5 to copy it all the way through, then hit save. And I'll come back around and do the next step. Just and they look perfect. So you're only missing one little second. So what do you do? You put it on your first letter.
That's what I'm saying. Held on.
And now you take your mouse and you hold down, click and hold, and drag all the way down here. Okay, the only other thing yeah, go ahead and hit save. Just be safe. It's always good to hit save. All right. Yes. So when it's dark gray, it means there's nothing actually there. So let's see. So why ended up on the yellow?
I have no idea.
What do you want to do? Cut it off the layer it's not supposed to be on. I'm going to paste it. It's supposed to be on. Okay, so let's see what this one is.
I don't know what it is.
It's always put it right back when you actually cut it. I'm going to use orange layer. So now you're ready for this. So you chip. And you can select all of them in chain. Yeah, and if you take your mouse and just click and hold it down on the blue and drag, you can like little shift.
Those
Spot. You can accidentally let go, you can always put it back. You just lift it up so the top so it faces in this way. And just drag them out. Now all we have to do is continue this. F5, and because we've got a couple square letters in there, we want to click, so click right there for some. Click F5. I think we got a couple of floating letters. Turn on. So grab that beat again. So that's nice. Grab that. That might have been this is what's going to get later. Yeah, you should be good. All right, yeah. That's it. I don't know who this first. Ah, okay. Yours just is hateful. That's all. It just didn't like how you grabbed it. There's no like reason for it to have not worked. Try one more time. Click and hold down. And, like very forcefully. You don't have to hold shift. You don't like hold shift. Just click and drag. Yeah. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. You were doing it right. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah, how do I get the dog?
Okay. So first, let's get rid of. You got one extra little frame. Yeah, for the background, you don't have to drag it. Just click in the 60 spot and hit F5. Okay, so right click on it. And like, still got it. It's empty. You gotta delete it, but like, you gotta get it out of there. Hit remove frame. So now select it just like you did a second ago. Yeah. And click and hold and drag it all the way out here. Yeah, it's not wanting to do it for you right here.
When I get here, I click.
You can let go. So come back over here. Let's redo that. I know it's real frustrating because it just want to do it right there. So click that top and hold shift or however you select it. You can do it multiple ways. But just select those. Now click and hold with your mouse. You can let go of shift though.
Oh my, I already clicked it on that.
That's okay. Click and hold again. It's okay. Just click hold and keep dragging it. Yeah. When you get that like solid shape, that's good. Yeah. And now just click the 60 spot on your BG layer and hit F5. All right, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's do a couple things really quick, and actually this will be done really fast. So as I mentioned before, right now your letters, we made them with a text box. They are fluid, for lack of a better term. That means that we can change them at any point in time. We can edit them as long as they're a text box and change their font and their size and their color. Okay, the only problem with that is tweens don't work on text boxes. They just don't. Okay, so in order to make letters tween, we have to do something called break apart. And what that means is it just turns it into a shape, essentially. Okay, like a square or rectangle, but it's a letter shape. So what we're going to do is I want you to click on each letter. Just start with your first letter, click on it to select it. And you can right click with your mouse. And in this list, down near the bottom, like half, you'll see where it says break apart. Just click break apart. That's all you got to do. Okay, and it's not going to look different, except when you click on it, you can't highlight it anymore. You can't, it's not a text box. It's just a shape now. Okay, so do that with each of your letters. Just select each letter one at a time, right click, hit break apart. Okay, right click, break apart. And you don't have to select a certain layer. As long as you click on the letter, it should be fine. Okay, but do that for each one. And again, when you tap on them now, they're going to be like those little solid colored kind of things that you get with all the other shapes, that like half tone pattern. So hit save. And we're about ready to actually make a juicy stuff. And you can still resize them and stuff as shapes. So I think you might click mouse button. Go back over there to the screen. Right. So click right on the button. So tap the letter right here. You can click it on the screen. So like just click your J on the screen. Yeah, and now right. There you go. I don't know why it has two different lists, but it does. Yeah. You were doing it right. It was just not cooperating too well. All right. Yeah. Oh, I'll come right back, Christian. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Is that the right font and everything? All right. I'll let you put it right into the new screen. Okay. And we'll just break it apart like you just said. I mean, sometimes something. But right click on it. And just say,
Read it.
all right, Christian, I'm sorry. You lose a letter.
He's not looking on each other.
Okay. So let's pause for a second. I think. So look with me really quick. So we see our S layer here. You see how the whole strip is dark gray, but down here the other ones have a light gray. I think accidentally our S ended up on a different layer, and that's why it's not like what we do today. It looks like maybe because the P is selected too, it's on the P layer. Let's try something really quick. Tap off here to just like let go of everything, and just tap the white part of your S. And what we can do is come over to edit. We're gonna cut it for just a second. It's gonna disappear, and then we'll put it back. Now let's click on that frame right there. What we're gonna do is we're gonna paste it on the layer it's supposed to be on. So hit edit, but we're gonna do special paste. We're gonna do paste in place, and we'll get right back where it was. And now look at that. They're all happy. They're all good. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, because it did get rearranged. No. Doesn't matter for what we're doing. I think he might have already done it. That one's a shape already. Yeah, if it doesn't give you the option to break apart, you probably type it. So just check it. Yeah, break apart again. If you click on it and we don't get a text box anymore, then it should be good. Yeah, do that. Yeah, so far it's right. All we should have is the background until the very end. Yeah, so yours looks right. He just happens to be at the back end of his timeline. That's why I see his name. Okay, all right. I know we have a lot of starting, stopping. I'm sorry. So here's where we're gonna kind of have a little bit of like free choice on it. All right. Right now we have our timeline ending at 60 frames. Okay, it's at the 60 mark. Eventually, we do want all of our letters to show up at the very end. Okay, but what we can do is we can rearrange kind of how they show up. So like, let me open my example one more time really quick because I think it's a little easier to like see it first and then decide what you want to do. So if you take a look down here, you see how I kind of have like a set of stairs on my timeline? Okay, what I did was I decided that I would have each letter fall into place at a different time. And they don't have to go in order. I happen to do mine from the first letter like through, but you could do it in any order. And what I did was I just dragged them backwards so that they slowly kind of came in at different times instead of all transforming at exactly the same speed and the exact same like frame. So what I mean by that is we've got these nice light colored frames right here, right? We dragged them down here to the end to move where they started. We can drag them back to start them in a different place. So let's pick a letter, and really it doesn't matter which letter, it's up to you. Okay, but let's move them, and I want you to keep them within a certain range for me. Okay, don't go further down past 25. You can go in the 25 range to 60. Okay, don't go below 25. But if you select one frame and you highlight it blue, the same way that we dragged before, if you click and hold with your mouse and you just drag it, so like I'm going to put this one maybe at the 30 spot. And it is important, it'll let you move them on different layers. Don't do that. Keep it on the same layer. It's easy to like move, just don't let go and then put it back. You can always hit Control Z. But I'm just going to drop it like right there. And so now my J letter starts at the 30th frame instead of at the very end. And you see how it made that span for me? It made the light gray because it assumes once the letter shows up on the timeline, we want to keep the letter until the very end. It's trying to be helpful in its own little way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on each one, and I'm just going to move them in a little bit. That way they all kind of land in place at a different time. So just take a second, anywhere between 25 and 60, grab each frame, but have them end at different places. So don't let them all be at the exact same spot, just to give your animation a little something different. Okay, if it all happens at once, it's not as exciting to look at. I like to do steps, but again, you can do it in any order and it still looks just as cool. And you can play it through and just kind of see how it comes in. Again, anywhere between 25 and 60. And then just hit save. Control S, save. Hopefully all of this feels very, very easy. And that will mean when we start a project kind of on your own next class that it's going to be cake. And you're just going to have the opportunity to make something that you want to make. And you'll have the skills you need. All right. So, and you can, again, you can adjust this. It doesn't have to look just like this. This is just the example that we're doing, and it works in this way. But you can make it work the same way with a bunch of different types of letters or shapes and things. Okay, so now what we're going to do, at the very beginning of my example animation, I have 5 circles. I have 5 circles because there are 5 letters in the name for my example. Okay, you could choose any shape you would like. We'll look at all the different shapes really quick. If you want to do a rectangle, a circle, if you want to do multiple different types of shapes, that's cool. But what we're going to do is just like we put a letter on every layer, we've got to put one shape on every layer. And the idea behind one shape on every layer is that that shape is going to turn into the letter as it animates. So I want you to come down to your timeline. Start with your very first letter at the bottom. Okay, mine happens to be J. And I want you to click in the very first frame. Right now, the very first frame on the timeline for that layer should be dark gray because there's not actually anything there. Okay, and now you can come over here to your toolbar and find that rectangle shape. If you hold, if you click and hold with your mouse down, there are other shapes. Okay, don't use any of the primitive ones. They sound like somehow they would be semi-interesting. They're not. They're not, I promise, okay? But you could grab a rectangle. You can get an oval. The polystar is basically a polygon. If you tap with it, okay, it'll let you make different types of shapes. And if you draw with it, and over here on the bottom, I can actually adjust how it looks. So I can change it to a star if I want to, and now it'll draw a star. So I don't care what shape you use, circle, rectangle, star. Okay, but just don't use a primitive one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a random spot, and I'm going to draw one shape. Okay, and I'm not going to make my shapes too big because just like the letters, we want the shapes to have enough room to move around. Now, it doesn't matter where you put your shape. When you draw your shape, you can come back over here to the toolbar and grab the free transform tool. You can make it a different size. You can put it wherever you want. Even though my J starts over here, I'm just going to put the circle over here. And later on, it will turn into the J. Okay? And we're going to repeat that for each of your letter layers. Okay? So this is my one for the J layer. That layer, if I look down here, it's all light gray. Check. It's done. Now I'm going to go to the next layer. I'm going to click on the very first frame, and I'm going to draw a new shape. Okay, and you can make the shapes different colors. When you draw them, you can come over here to the fill and change their color. They can be whatever color you want them to be. But take a few minutes to do that for each layer. Hit save. I know I've got several questions. I'm coming around.
Oh no.
Okay, show me what it looks like. Okay, it's weird. It's very, very, very. It should work, and it's frustrating now because that's one too. Try one more time. Whenever it does that, click one more time, and just don't immediately drag it. Click it first, and then go.
Oh, it's like rectangle.
Now click and hold it. Yeah, you see how it only 2 clicks. It should be. Yeah. So try one more time. Anytime it starts to get a long line like that, it's not good. This one is there. Now let go. Now click it.
Same size?
You see how you get one frame? That's perfect. That's what you want. And then just drop it where you want to. Yeah, it's just very picky about it. to, and then here's the outline. So for some reason, they should work the same. How's it? Okay. Oh, it won't matter. Your layers are out of order down here. It won't matter. They're all going to move and they're going to end up where you put them and you put them in order on the screen. So if they're out of order down here, that actually matters with this particular problem. So if you're okay with the J one being the black star, just put it where you want it to be, and then we'll do the A one next. And it won't hurt.
Single or lower.
Yeah. I don't know. So what it is over here, you can actually on the box part, we just click the dot, and what it does is it just like when you have tons of layers, it helps you focus. But if you tap it again, it should go back. Yeah. We just haven't learned about it. You're so yes. So go ahead, grab the arrow tool really quick and just try to just say backspace and draw. Tap it one more time. Now try over. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I should have. I do want you to double check for me really quick. So when you make your shapes, okay, sometimes by default, when you draw a shape, it will have an outline around it. I'm looking around. Most of you don't have the outline turned on. If you do, we can turn it off. Okay, but when you draw your shape, like I'm on the shape tool over here, you could pick the inside color, which is the fill, and you can pick the stroke, which is the outline. We don't want a stroke. And the reason why, this is so dumb. This is how I've kind of mentioned to you before. Like, let me do one with a stroke just so you can see what I'm talking about. I've mentioned to you before, this is not the app that most real animators really like design in. And it's because it has some limitations to it. So like when I draw this circle and it's got an outline around it and I put a really thick one on it, because they're two separate colors, Animate kind of sees them as two separate shapes. So like if I click the white circle, it will move, but then the red ring, which is the outline of it, it doesn't move with it. It moves like a separate shape. That's not always a problem. But when we turn on the shape tween here in a minute, if you have an outline on your shapes, it's not going to know what to turn into your letters because it's going to see two different shapes that are competing to be whatever letter is on that same layer. So if you do happen to have a shape, let me go back, that has an outline on it, just take your mouse tool and click directly on that outline. Like you could just click on it, and because it's its own little shape, just hit backspace. I don't think most of you have that issue, but just in case you do, hit backspace. Looking around, I don't see a whole lot, but I know some of them do it by default. Thank you. Oh wait, she's in here second bar on eating. Sorry. You want me to look up her shoes really quick?
Or could you just give it to me, Lauren?
Does it matter that it says urgent and red with exclamation points and underlines? It'll take just a second. Hang on. Okay. It'll work. All right, do me a favor. Hit save. I'm sorry. Give me just a second. Let me look up something really quick. I'm supposed to. All right. So, sorry. Let me catch back up to you all really quick. So again, make sure, double check your layers. Now every layer should be like a light gray color all the way through from beginning to end because you should have a shape of some kind on every layer. And you can put the shapes wherever you want them to be on the screen, doesn't matter. I'm just gonna kind of put mine there like that. Okay, I'm gonna hit save. Okay. Now, at this point, we're pretty much done with everything, okay? All we have to do at this point, and you could play through, it's not going to tween yet, but you should just kind of see, like, how they pop into place, okay? All we need to do now is we need to add the actual tween to it, okay? So, I'm going to go ahead and come down to my layers panel on the timeline, and I'm going to select all my layers, okay? You could select them all at once, if you start, let's actually start in the top left-hand corner. If I click that first frame right there, and then I hold shift down, you don't have to get the BG layer. The BG layer is not doing anything. It's not moving. But if you grab the very bottom right-hand frame on your last layer that has a letter on it, and you could do it individual lines. It won't hurt you to do it individual lines. But if you select all that and then right-click, all the tweens are always up here at the top. I want you to choose the shape tween. It's the third one down, shape tween. Okay? And when you do that, we should get this nice kind of like orange color across there. And if you hit enter, it should kind of play through. Okay? So give it a little try, see if it works. All right? Hang on just a second.